Hi guys, this is my review on The Alchemy of Forever by Avery Williams, and this was sent to me by Simon & Schuster, the lovely folks there, and I was essentially attracted to, I've got some kind of mark on the front cover, I was essentially attracted to the novel because of the title, and I thought it had a really nice lyrical sort of ring to it, and it's about immortality, and I just thought that it sounded different because it wasn't trying to incorporate any major mythological creature into the mix. So there weren't vampires, there weren't any other substitutes for those sort of creatures in there at all. It was essentially just about immortality and the idea of living forever and taking over new bodies. So I suppose in a way you could equate that to vampirism, or even like the notion of a ghost, but none of that kind of ever came into it at any stage, which was sort of refreshing because it was just its own thing, and yeah, you didn't need any of the glitz and glamour of a known mythological being to amp it all up, which was nice. I think I've seen some other covers on Goodreads, and they seem to look a little bit more appealing than this one, essentially because if you look, the girl on the cover looks really quite young, and to my knowledge the body that Serafina takes over, which is Kaylee, her name is, I think she's about 16, so I don't know, is it just me or does that girl look about 12 years old? Anyway, so that's disturbing. She's also doing quite a Children of the Corn face, if you can see. It's a bit freaky, so anywho. But yeah, essentially this novel deals with Serafina, who's been alive for a few centuries now. She was changed, I guess, hold on, I'll check the year, in London in 1349 by a lad she met named Cyrus, and Cyrus was an alchemist. He was the son of a pharmacist, and he had a real interest in like the magic of science, and then events happen, everything moves very quickly in the book because it's only 246 pages, so it's very, very quick, easy read. And yeah, so he and Serafina become immortals, and they take over the bodies of someone new every 10 years or so, and Serafina tries to live by a bit of a moral code with it, and always attempts to take the bodies of drug addicts, or people who have maybe a terminal illness or something, people who are dying anyway, because that lessens her guilt with the whole thing. And Cyrus over the centuries has revealed himself to be a bit of a douchebag and a little bit insane and rather a control freak and not a very nice guy, and yet Sarah has always sort of been his partner, and she's feeling trapped, so she's trying to get out of it. Essentially she wants to die, but then her plans go awry and she ends up in a new body of this dying teenager named Kaylee who had a car crash, and so she very soon becomes attracted to Kaylee's life and doesn't want to leave, but oh no, Cyrus is still out there and he's coming for her. And that's essentially the crux of the story, and it's over with very quickly. And I think that I don't like to give out the idea that a short book doesn't equal a good book. I think that it's perfectly plausible that a really short novel can still be a fantastic read and can still have plenty of substance and linger with you long after it, and you know, be just as appealing as a really heavy tome of a book. I just think maybe it's kind of like crafting a very good short story. I guess you have to be able to really effectively do everything you could potentially do in a substantial sized novel in a shorter amount of time. And I guess no, it just depends. I don't know, some novelists and some stories can lend themselves better to a short format than others can, and I have a feeling that this story would have been served a lot better if there had been at least 104 pages to the book. It's also quite large print, really, I guess, so it just feels like it felt like this was sort of like the bones, I guess, of quite an interesting little tale, but we never really got anything else built on top of that because there wasn't enough time. And it is the first in a series, I'm assuming, because it ends on a cliffhanger, and the cliffhanger, like, this shows you how fast things go and how brief everything is, because the cliffhanger itself doesn't really start until about there on the last page. So suddenly it's like, this is oh, and then it's over. So yeah, I think essentially I had a hard time I just wasn't that interested in the details of anything within the book, because there weren't many details, because everything was just rushing through and kind of glossed over, which was a shame, because I could have potentially been really interested in the characters and what was going on, but we didn't get to really know anybody very well at all. None of the relationships were fleshed out. The backstory of like the coven that Sarah and Cyrus kind of formed over the centuries with all these other immortals coming in, none of that was really shown. And the backstory element was really only the one chapter at the very beginning of the book, and I would have liked to have spent more time with them over the centuries to see what was going down, and to see Cyrus digress from being kind of mysterious dude with hyper-intelligence and a bit of a god complex to someone who was, you know, an asshole. I would have liked to have seen that happen. I would have liked to, I wanted a lot more time, and I guess more detail to be given, because it could have been something really, really cool, I think. That said, I mean, it wasn't a bad read. It really, really wasn't. There's nothing that I necessarily disliked about the book, or even the characters that were there. I just felt like you were kind of just skimming along on a really quick boat ride, and you would have liked it to have been a bit more leisurely, so you could take in the sights and see the fish, and that's my metaphor analogy thing. But I just, I think more time spent with the characters, and more detail provided about the scenarios and the atmosphere, the locations, and especially all the relationships would have been very rewarding and would have served the material a lot better, because it's a really very interesting idea, I think. Kind of cool, and I'm interested enough in it from the supernatural, fantastical side of things that I would have liked more of that. You know, the science of how it worked, because it never felt that clearly explained to me anyway. How they go about changing the bodies and the rules regarding that, and because, I mean, it was mentioned that, like, the 10-year rule, because the bodies are breaking down because you've taken their soul from them, but it's just, it never felt explained enough to me to be satisfying, and yeah, I wanted a lot more time, more pages, and more detail, so that I could have actually felt a connection to the book, whereas I kind of was standing outside of it, and there was a bit of a detachment, because there just wasn't enough. I actually remember feeling a bit similar when I read Academy 7 by Anne Osterland. I wanted to feel a bit more strongly about it than I did, and interestingly enough, it was almost as long. It was, how long was it? 259 pages, which I guess, you know, is a reasonable length, but maybe I just like longer books, I don't know. But it was a standalone novel, which I guess is a different sort of feel, because that was all you were going to get, whereas this is going to continue, I'm assuming. So I don't know, yeah, I felt a bit detached and a bit unsatisfied, but I did not dislike anything about it, so I'm tempted to give it 2.5 stars, because there just wasn't enough meat in there for me, but I think I'll be a bit kinder and I'll give it a 3. But certainly give it a read if you're interested in, you know, immortal stuff going down, and you don't have to deal with vampires or any of that stuff, because we've got more than enough of those beings covered in all our YA. So yeah, just give it a whirl if you want, and if, like me, you really like the title, because I think The Alchemy of Forever is a really pretty title. And that's that. So 3 stars out of 5 for The Alchemy of Forever by Avery Williams. Scary